Hi, I'm Ted Kofi, and I'm putting together another quick video on my truth-telling strand on my YouTube channel. Tonight it's going to be about the media and what it's doing to you and I, to all of us. But let me start off with the story of Hamlet. Do you remember the Prince of Denmark and his big speech, his big soliloquy to himself? He said, to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or by taking up arms against a sea of woes and by opposing end them. He didn't know what to do. And this has been rattling around my head, his little speech, all day. And it's made me think about the value and the purpose of our education. I remember about 4 years ago when my daughter was doing her first degree, political science. She happened to say to me that actually, Dad, the problem with a lot of education today is it's turning out it churns out people with exam passes, and that education creates schools which are basically exam factories where kids are taught to pass exams. But the process of what education is supposed to do to you isn't really bedded in to the soul, the psyche of the people. Now, it seems to me that in the West, the tradition of education has become one in which people are produced who are useful for doing jobs. But in the other thing that education is supposed to do, provide a sense of self, introspection, awareness, give one the ability to decide, to make the big decisions, to confront the moral conundrums that every human being will encounter. Our modern day education is sadly quite remedial, quite woeful. Now, it seems to me also that what education does is that it creates people who know how to follow orders, people who know how to be sheep, but not many people who are able to think freely and independently for themselves. I mean, there is always free thought, but it is within certain very strict tramlines, beyond which you don't go outside of the tramlines this way, and you don't go outside of the tramlines that way. So basically, people are order takers. Now, this kind of education teaches people how to fit into a system. Of course, if you're black, it's very difficult, because if you're going to fit in, where do you fit in and as what? Because in the Western system of social organization, everything is color-coded, and black people are always at the bottom. It doesn't matter how many qualifications you have. There will always come a way in which people will be shown that because of their color, they are worth less. Yesterday, I watched this documentary on BBC iPlayer, presented by David Harewood, a brilliant actor, brilliant actor. He had to go to America to make his fortune with that series Homeland, in which he played the part of this high-ranking CIA officer. I won't tell you what happened to him, because if you haven't watched the series 1 and 2 and 3, it'd be a terrible spoiler, but he was a brilliant actor. Came back to England to do the series about why COVID is killing people of colour. And one of the powerful strands that David unearthed in that documentary was that actually the reason people of colour were dying so much in the United Kingdom for certain, and very likely in the United States as well, was because of health inequalities. And these inequalities weren't based on their socioeconomic classification, because, for example, most of the doctors who died as a result of COVID, now stop there for a moment. A doctor knows about physiology. They know something about nutrition. They're not poor. They're paid very good living wages. They're more or less given more respect than almost any other profession in society. And yet, the doctors of color were still dying more than their white counterparts. And there were various reasons for this, including the fact that they actually didn't feel empowered to speak up to their needs for PPE, to their needs for being rostered in a more fair way, to their needs for being more in the administrative sectors, which were not in the front line of the pandemic. So if you're a person of color, as they're so called, whatever that is, if you're a person of color, the inequalities in the health system will affect your health and will make you more vulnerable to COVID, if for no other reason than the fact that there are strains and stresses which people of color encounter, which white people don't encounter. And that in and of itself is a depressor of your immune system. But moving on, our education teaches us how to fit in. But as I say, if you're a person who looks like me, where do you fit in and how do you fit in? Of course, political philosophers in the past, like Kwame Nkrumah, had an answer for this. He talked about the African personality, which is what brings me to my main point on this tape tonight. It's about the media. The media is supposed to be free, but is in actual fact the tool, the weapon used by those who control the means of production to make people who have been educated to follow the rules of society to go down the path that those who control the means of production want them to go down. The media does not encourage freedom of thinking. And given that the education is about making people not think for themselves, but to follow the rules and think within those tramlines anyway, the media just accelerates people's flow down there. Again, if you're a person of color, like me, the media does nothing but bombard you with negative stereotypes. It always shocks me when people, documentary makers, go to Africa. I don't know what's in their heads and I don't know what's in their eyes. But show me a story about Africa done by a white journalist, and I'll show you a series of negative stereotypes, negative images, the low-key message that that Africa needs to be saved from itself, the low-key message that Africa's a basket case, the low-key message that without Western intervention, Africa won't be doing very well. Whereas, actually, the opposite is often the truth. That if the West was not to intervene in Africa the way it has traditionally done for 400-500 years, Africa would have gone much, much more progressively ahead. So, the other thing about the media is that rather than focus our eyes on the things that really matter, the media throws up massive distractions from what our real concern should be. I'll give you, for example, for instance. Right now, all I hear from the world's still most powerful nation, the Americans, have got far more military materiel and money than anybody else on the planet today, still. And yet this country, the most powerful nation in the world, is on its knees. It's on its knees because it's riven down the center. It is completely disunited. And it's because all the media does is serve up this constant and staple diet of how Trump is in the wings of the Republican Party, bringing America down. Meanwhile, America's real problems are: 1, making an economic comeback. after a catastrophic series of shutdowns, to how it needs to manage this pandemic. And by politicizing the role and function of a person like Trump, the role and function of mask wearing and everything, everybody's forgotten the fact that an experimental biological agent has been approved to be put in the arms of the world population. Nobody questions this. If you question it, I'm skating right on the edge of things. Right now, if you question it, the media can shut you down. That's what I mean about a media that distracts people from what really counts. And yet, despite this, if people had been educated to deal with the moral conundrums that life will throw up, if you're a human being, there are certain fundamental difficulties each one of us will face. Today I posted on Facebook about Sir Thomas More, who for me is one of my top 3 Englishmen of all time. And he confronted this moral conundrum, just as Hamlet was talking about in Shakespeare's play. He came head to head with his very good friend, Henry VIII, Henry Tudor, King of England, who had him as his Lord High Chancellor. And, they came head to head over religious issues. And Thomas More had to say to the king, and this his famous quote was, "I remain your loyal servant, sir, but God's first." This is a huge, huge, huge moral conundrum we all, you and I, must face, whether we're a king or a pauper, whether we're at the top of society or right at the bottom of society. Who is your master? Conscience or the person who pays you the money, the person who has power over your life? This is a moral conundrum. It goes to the whole matter of what is your humanity, what is your worth as a human being, and so on and so forth. Now, for me, that's what education is supposed to equip a person to grapple with and make a decision over. Look, listen, I'm no kind of crazy idealist. You have children, you got to feed them. You have children, you have to clothe them. You got children, you got to educate them. You have to look after yourself. You have to feed yourself. These are all very practical realities that the moment you're born onto planet Earth, you're going to have to confront. But at what price do you do these things? And that's what we got to be able to solve. So, this is the conundrum we all face right now. We are in the middle of the biggest decisions this planet, I would say, has made in the last 100 years. The decisions we're taking now actually trump the decisions of the First World War and the Second World War. First World War lost 10 million lives. Second World War lost between 60 and 80 million lives, depending on how you look at it. The decisions we're making now dwarf those 2 big conflicts. And there I was thinking that my generation had missed a war and that, we'd got home scot-free. Oh, no, we haven't. We are facing the biggest conundrum of the last 100 years. Question is, with the kind of media which fills our heads with pap to distract and deflect from where our true responsibilities lie, and an educational system created to make us present as sheep and follow our leaders, how equipped are we for the challenges of today? This is a huge problem, a massive problem, and I think it's one that we can pretend that problem isn't there, but the problem is always there. It's right in front of us, and one which we are going to have to solve. And I would say that it is only the most naive, only the worst educated man who could say to himself, oh, don't bother about it, tomorrow will take care of itself. Say that to the captain of the Titanic as he sailed towards that iceberg. Thanks very much. Look, please subscribe to my platform, to my account on YouTube, which is where this thing is going to come from. Comment, share, and let me know what you think about this post. Have a great evening.